Welcome to the AI Beehive Podcast, Real Estate and Mortgage Pros. This is your buzz for smarter tech, faster deals, and less grind. Let's get started.
Well, hey there. Welcome to another episode of the AI Beehive Podcast. My name is Ginger Bell, and I have my co-host with me, Mr. George Chevalier. George, how are you today?
Hello, everybody. I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk with Alex today and get the legal perspective to this AI stuff.
Awesome. So let me introduce our guests. So Miss Alex Temple, who is a partner from Mitchell Sandler, is joining us today. And Alex does bring that perspective on the legal side. You know, oftentimes we have vendors on here. We've had originators on here, realtors talking about how they're using AI. So bringing that legal aspect as far as what companies need to look at when they're using AI is very important. And I know, George, you prepared some rapid fire questions.
Yes.
So lots of great things to get started with. And so, George, I'm going to let you start off because you have a great list of questions to ask Alex today.
All right, Alex, this is our rapid fire segment. And so here we go. What I want to know is this a myth or a fact?
Okay.
If a tool says it's AI powered, it's automatically compliant with lending laws.
Myth.
What's the truth about that?
Yeah,
What's the truth,
AI powered certainly does not mean compliant with rules and regs. And you know, it's interesting. While we all know that the landscape regarding AI specific laws, rules, and regs is just the groundwork is just starting to be laid right now. There's some states that have put out some guidance. We know Freddie Mac has put out some guidance. CFPB's put out some guidance, but very high level and certainly not a lot of firm requirements, so much as best practices. But there are still real laws and regulations that have been around for quite some time that do impact tools that are powered by AI. Things like data privacy and security, things like ECOA and fair lending and rules, again, that have been around for a while. And just because the tool is AI powered certainly doesn't mean that it's compliant with those regulations or even best practices in terms of, what we've seen come out from the state regulators thus far.
All right. So my next question, using AI for underwriting will eliminate bias entirely.
Myth. I think right now we don't quite know what could happen with a generative AI model when it comes to underwriting. The hope is that we can come up with some sort of, somebody out there, a vendor out there will come up with a tool that is truly breaks any sort of bias and make sure that the model works in a way that is non-discriminatory, of course, and also just non-biased in any way, shape, or form. But that is not, we don't have that tool currently, to my knowledge. And the real concern when it comes to things like fair lending and ensuring outside of regulatory requirements that borrowers are just getting an even and fair shot at credit is really whether these generative AI models are going to have some sort of bias baked within them unintentionally on the part of the developers, just the way the model sort of evolves over time. These models do change and evolve the more data they get. A lot of them do, at least. So again, making sure that the people who are putting out AI models that deal with things as sensitive as underwriting and the approval of credit transactions is going to be really, really important to understand what exactly is going into those models and how decisions are being made, and also being able to prove how those decisions were made and really back that up with data.
Yeah, and I'm going to hop in there too, because we had a conversation the other day with a lender who, in their state exam, they were in Florida. That was one of the questions through their state exam is how much of the decision and the underwriting decision is being made by AI. So having an idea on that, and we are starting to see that in some of the states. What are you seeing as far as some of the states, as far as changes in the examination process with AI?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we just had an attorney attend the ARMOR conference, and I think what the buzz has sort of been is from those regulators is they know the industry is using AI and they want to use AI themselves, right? They want to use AI to figure out who they're going to examine and trends and the way that everything's sort of shaking out in the industry holistically. But they also know that the patchwork that is happening, because there isn't any federal mandate at this point or federal regulation or regulatory scheme, but that states are starting to, put out their own rules, is also potentially problematic and could lead to a confusing landscape. So I think, we're starting to see states, like you said, just sort of like scratch at the issue and try to understand how companies are using it. But we haven't yet seen like an overhaul in the way that the examinations are being conducted, or a complete shift in tone to, there's nobody no person in the loop in the origination process. Tell us about your technology. So they're still looking at, like always, the entire origination process and trying to get a firm grasp on how does AI play a part in the process at this point. But again, haven't seen like an overhaul in the state examination frameworks at this point.
Right.
This is becoming very not rapid fire, George. I apologize.
That's okay. That's all right. Hey, but you're very thorough, and isn't that what an attorney is? So,
That's what we like.
Patience,
we love it. We love it. So let me ask you this: if an AI vendor stores the data, a broker or a lender can say that I'm not responsible for it.
Certainly not. So, for one, we all have a responsibility in the mortgage industry for overseeing our third-party service providers and ensuring that they are meeting, responsibilities set forth under rules and regulations applicable to the lenders themselves. So just because you say, I don't deal with the data and it's handled by somebody else, does not completely absolve you of responsibility, and certainly not of risk. You do have the responsibility for ensuring those vendors are appropriately handling data.
All right, nice. Now, my next question is, AI summaries of phone calls and meetings are always safe to share internally?
Myth, definitely not. But I'm thinking from a legal perspective, you certainly don't want conversations with your lawyers for attorney-client privilege reasons. But outside of that, I think AI in general at this point should always be audited. If we're saying, should these things be pulled down cold and sent around? No, I think we need to be keeping a close eye on, again, generative AI models do come to their own conclusions and summarize, and sometimes that's spot on and very, very helpful. And sometimes it can lead to misinterpretation or tweaks to language and meaning that, was not intended. And, you definitely want to avoid pitfalls that come from things like that.
Well, and relying on it too. I mean, and that's part of it. On AI Beehive, we obviously have a lot of different vendors that we post on there. And so they're not vetted. It's not something like that that's vetted out, and that's really where we're at. It's like, okay, here's some technology, here's some opportunities, here's what it does. But, we have tools like Roam, which replaces your Zoom meetings. And in it, they have an AI, and the AI records the meetings and it gives a summary and things like that. So I think having those best practices of reviewing that information, and especially if it's something you're going to send out that has, steps to an application or, something like that, are important. What are the things that somebody needs to look at in terms of reviewing that information on a consistent basis?
For one, I would say accuracy. Obviously, does it accurately reflect the conversations that were had, and otherwise the information that was shared? Two, making sure that the audience is appropriate. Sometimes you have closed meetings, and you talked about, the tool you use to sort of summarize what the meeting minutes were essentially. Listen, I'm a lawyer. I tend towards, keeping things high and tight when it comes to, information that's circulated about, what was said in a meeting. There's a closed door for a reason. There's only a certain number of people invited for a reason. So I love the tools. I love that we're able to sort of take the minute, the person who's clacking away on their keyboard the whole time and not fully engaged in the meeting, that we're allowed to sort of let them relax a little bit. But I think we have to be really careful about, auditing for accuracy, clarity. Next steps are appropriately, designated and distributed, but also that the audience that we're circulating this stuff to is appropriate. I think I'm seeing a little bit of oversharing right now because it's easier to share, and making sure that we keep audiences, to what they need to be in order to avoid all sorts of things. I mean, internal to your company, we're talking, it could be something as simple as, overstepping boundaries. But again, bringing it back to the legal world, you could talk about breaking attorney-client privilege, and these are things that should be taken very seriously.
Absolutely.
So I have one last question for you in our rapid fire round. If I don't mention AI to a regulator, they'll never know I'm using it.
Oh boy, don't we feel that way about a lot of things? No, it's just the same as the age old, like, yeah, but like if I don't put something in an LO's comp agreement, I just do it on the back end. Is anybody going to know about it? And regulators will find out the same way they do anything else. Consumer complaints, audits, where they're getting wiser to these things. Like I said, there was a lot of chatter at the Armor conference about from the state regulators about understanding the industry is using this stuff, understanding the various vendors that are out there and taking advantage of it themselves. They're getting wiser to how these things are being used, and they are going to start asking questions that open those doors, even if you don't proactively offer up the information.
Yeah. So with that in mind, because we do have so many vendors, I think we are probably approaching 200 vendors now that we have on the AI Beehive directory. And we find out about new ones each and every day. And we focus primarily on the mortgage and the real estate space and tools that can help, our audience. But as these vendors come about and they start, tipping, their toes into our world and our world of regulations, what are the things that these fintech organizations need to be doing in order to make sure that they are adhering to those regulations?
I mean, for one, engaging counsel that understands the regulation and the way that they're evolving. I think, keeping abreast of those rules is going to be incredibly important. Staying nimble, updating contract terms, and, keeping things flexible enough that the, lenders aren't afraid to engage in contracts that are going to lock them in for, a long period of time. And then, again, the framework changes, regulatory framework changes, or the use model changes, and all of a sudden they have a technology that is no longer valuable to them and they're paying an arm and a leg for it. That's problematic. But also, I think transparency, making sure that they document everything they're doing, the way they use AI and their models in the background, so that the lenders who are going to ultimately most likely be required to retain documentation on these types of things are able to do so. A responsible lender will be asking for these things now and into the future more and more. You don't want to be caught as a fintech vendor who can't sort of back up the way that they're using AI, the way that their tool intakes data, the way that it protects data and ensures that it meets privacy and security requirements. Just full transparency and documentation in the background.
Yeah, and I see that as being an advantage. So if you're an AI technology company, being able to show, hey, this is the process we went through to make sure that we are protecting you and protecting that, the data privacy and all those things. I think that becomes so important now as we see these, AI technology, companies evolving, especially when it comes to, we're seeing things on underwriting, Prudent AI that does a great job as far as underwriting, and it's still a blended, it's not completely AI, but still things like that. So having, them share what their vetting process is, what their, vendor management process is, I think is critical in terms of a compliance side. Yeah. So, what can companies do? And you're probably working on some of those right now at Mitchell Sandler as far as what technology companies can do to ensure that. So yeah. What are you doing?
Yeah, we definitely are working on risk management frameworks and audits where, you can sort of come to us instead of trying to understand this and have the in-house, know-how stacked up on your side. And, we can sort of lay out, what are the regs that are applicable to what you're doing? What are the guidance that's out there? How do those things overlap and interplay with one another? And what does that mean for you and your business, and how you need to get things up and running in a way that, again, you'll be able to not only interplay with the mortgage industry, but meet the compliance ramifications or the compliance requirements that are, the mortgage industry is attempting to, keep up with at all times.
Yeah.
And, another thing, like taking my compliance hat, my legal hat off for a second and talking operationally, I think for fintech vendors and those, trying to get into the AI space with mortgage specifically, One of the biggest things that I saw as my time as the CEO of a third-party service provider serving the mortgage industry was that actually implementing these technologies is incredibly difficult. We're an industry that is, we tend to lag behind a little bit, but we're trying really hard to catch up. I mean, honestly, right. The buzz is it's the right, we're moving in the right direction, but actually operationally changing the way that these loans are originated, introducing new technologies, and truly understanding the way that the tech stack interplays with one another, who's doing what, when and how that, they plug in and overlap and where the gaps might be. It's getting more and more complicated as time goes on. And, these smaller vendors start to enter the playing field, and the smaller technologies that do really nuanced items get overlaid with your LOS and your CRM and your POS and all of these different things that we have to do now to remain relevant as lenders. So coming up with a good implementation model or an implementation team or a technology that plugs in well so people are actually getting the return on investment they expect to get when they sign on is just going to become more and more and more important. And I think I feel for the mortgage lenders who are navigating the space right now, because it's tough. It's really tough to make sure that you're implementing these things effectively so that you do get that ROI, especially in a tough time right now.
That raises another question. When you think about brokers and lenders who are wanting to start with AI, how do they balance moving fast with making sure that they put the right legal guardrails in place?
Yeah. I think it's twofold. For one, moving fast, for me, what I see that slows companies down more than anything is overcomplicating the sort of internal framework of the company. It's not clear delineation between who does what, or almost like a battlefield. Who's required or involved with implementation of new technologies or approving new vendors or all of these things. That just slows the process down. So really taking a look at your operations and your processes and cleaning things up, making it really clear who's responsible for what, that'll speed things up. But balancing that with compliance, from my perspective, the most important thing anybody can do right now is sit down and figure out what are your internal policies for using and implementing AI. What is going to be acceptable use? What is unacceptable use? What is your governance committee going to look like? What are they going to review? When are they going to review it? Get that framework in place so that when a new tech hits your inbox, that new vendor looking to sort of get a demo in place and you're really excited about it, what the steps are that you can take that gets the ball rolling. I think right now, lenders and brokers are getting sort of lost in the sauce. They hear this new vendor and they're like, wait a minute, there's all these implications, and I got to get my compliance, my head of IT, and I probably should get the president or the CEO of the company involved because this is so big and potentially changing to what we're doing. So map out what that approval process is going to look like, and make it really clear who's involved, and making sure that moves through the system while meeting appropriate regulatory and policy check boxes as you go.
So it seems like it sounds like the key is to make it compliance a part of the buildup and not an afterthought. It needs to be a forethought, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are sitting around waiting for some big regulatory framework to be sat in our lap so we can come up with a beautiful compliance program. Everybody wants 100% compliance, right? But I think there's a lot we can do leading up to that, and thinking through the way that you want to implement AI, what you're comfortable with, what you think is responsible use of AI based on what we know about the data that we get from customers and the decisions that the AI could be potentially making on behalf of us and using our name as a lender. Sit down and figure those things out. You can always tweak as you go, but I think having that framework in place is a really good starting place for if a formal framework from a regulatory perspective is handed, down and we're forced to comply. But again, I think a lot of this is going to be left to the discretion of the lenders, and responsible use is going to be definitionally, it's going to be defined by us for a long time. So I think it's time to sit down and figure some of that out.
Yeah. Do you have a package? So if someone, because we, a lot of our audience obviously are vendors, are lenders, that are just, dipping their toes in, as you say. Do you have something where it's like, hey, we really need help with this, Alex? Can you, help us through this process?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, again, this is really would be an interactive, discussion with the clients. But not only do we have a risk assessment that we could put a client through, how are you using AI? How are you implementing these things? What does it do for you?
Right.
But also, let's talk policy. Let's talk governance committee. Let's talk about how you plan to deploy these things, or what is unacceptable use from your perspective. Let's put it on paper. Let's get some training together, and let's deploy that to your company in a way that's going to, get everybody up to snuff. Because I do think left to their own devices, your employees will use AI.
Yeah.
At least the new generation. But at this point, it feels like everybody's using it in their own way. So they're going to use it. Now you have to figure out how to make sure that again, is sort of reined in and is responsible in nature.
Yeah, it's kind of like when social media first came out. And originally, a lot of organizations was like, you can't use it. And so people were secretly using it. And then there were tools to catch them using it, and they'd get their hands slapped. And then it's like, then they were using different names. And it's like, okay, they're going to use it. So let's set up the best practices, and let's set up the rules. And, George, you called it the guardrails. It's kind of like going bowling and having little guardrails up. It's like, and I think that's where we're at right now. It's like, what does that look like? And how, at the end of the day, it all comes down to protecting the consumer. Yeah. And so that's the most important thing. And when you come into it from that mindset, whether you are, a technology company that is using this, even if you're a fintech and you're saying, hey, I want to add an AI element, even as something as simple as a bot, having that is important. Which brings me to my next question, which is, as we evolve into these tools, and I mean, we have tools like Macy 365 that is phenomenal in terms of a bot conversation, from the very beginning conversation all the way through post-application processing, things like that. We're seeing those tools, but disclosing that, I think, is important, and how much of it is being used is important. So those are things to look at as well. What other things should they look at in terms of, the process and those steps when they're setting these up?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of, a mortgage lender who's deploying a fintech or an AI vendor, I would say the most important sort of sequence of events is you have your own internal framework set up, that when you understand, again, all the things we've talked about, how you're going to use it, what's acceptable use, all of those things. Then when you get a vendor who's coming to the table, you know what you're going to be looking at in diligence. So you're putting it through your vendor management process, but you're looking at your vendor management process and making sure you understand how the various ways AI could be deployed impact the risk that the vendor represents for your company, and you're classifying them appropriately and asking for the right documentation, reviewing that documentation, or having somebody review the documentation who understands what it means, and how that impacts your business and what you should be looking at and concerned about. So your, again, internal framework, appropriate vendor management, and review. And then you're doing ongoing reviews of the way that you're using the technology and the risks that not only were posed from the beginning, but how it was actually implemented, how that risk evolved, because it's likely that it will evolve if you're using something like a chatbot, or any really generative AI model. So you want to be continuously monitoring the use of the AI vendor and the model, and sort of staying abreast of how things evolve and what that means for you, and any, security or risk parameters you need to put in place based on the evolved risk.
Yeah, a lot that goes into it for sure. So if our audience wants to get in touch with you, how can they reach you, Alex?
Email is definitely the best way to reach me. It's attached to my hand and my hip at all times. atemple@mitchellsandler.com is how you can reach me. We do put out, as the new states and the agencies put out guidance, we publish on our website, what that guidance looks like, what it means, how they overlap, how they compare against one another. We're putting out that guidance as well. So mitchellsandler.com is a good place to find those articles and publications. But I'm always, around for the conversation. I know this is complex, and again, new laws, proposed laws, the way they interface with existing laws can be confusing. But we're all in it together. We're all navigating the same landscape. So it's exciting, and I think so long as we're not scared of it, we're embracing it and making sure that we understand what responsible use looks like. I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. And you do such a great job explaining that. And I appreciate that so much. And our audience does as well. And I'm sure that you're going to be very busy speaking at a lot of conferences that are coming up on AI. We're starting to see a lot of those conversations happening now at the conferences. And so I imagine you will be probably pretty busy talking about that because you do such a great job with it. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you. And I love to talk about it. There's something new every day. It's again, brand new world for all of us. So we'll navigate it together, and I'm happy to be a part of the conversation.
Awesome. Great. Okay, George, did you hit all your rapid fire questions?
All of them are done. Alex, you did a great job on giving us a clear playbook for innovating with AI without violating any being on the wrong side of regulators. So you've really helped us with that. We really appreciate that. This is really gold for our listeners. If you guys need help with compliance, reach out to Alex and let her help you. Let her help you get your solid footing in regards to the AI and how it can be innovated and introduced into your company.
Yeah, please do. Thanks for that, George. I really appreciate being here and having the conversation.
Yeah, well, that's our goal in putting this out there, is to be able to bring the resources and the tools to be able to help all of us navigate through AI. And if you're looking for AI tools, make sure and check out the AI Beehive website. And we also have our app is available on the iPhone and coming soon to Android. And so you can log in there and see that. And we actually have it where you can set up an account and you can save your favorite AI tool. So you don't have to keep going searching for them again. You can actually create a library of the tools that you like, that you want to come back to. So that's our goal, is to provide that information. And thank you, Alex, for your information. We appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll see you on the next AI Beehive podcast. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the AI Beehive Podcast, where real estate and mortgage pros get the buzz on all things AI. Don't forget to subscribe, share the buzz, and visit www.aibeehive.com to keep building your smarter business. Until next time.